bears go into the freaking cave and they do not come out. They just sleep. They're not like running around in the middle of like a snow-covered forest, like trying to kill a whole bunch of things, because they will die. And the same thing for us as entrepreneurs. If we don't give ourselves radical winters to actually hibernate and be, we just can't. We just literally just burn out. Well, in this episode, I interview Kate Alexandra, who is a yoga teacher, women's circle facilitator, mom of 2 kiddos, and really, really passionate about the feminine divine, the feminine power, and self-nurture. We talk about all things motherhood, from sleep regressing toddlers to breastfeeding journeys that were really difficult for both of us, to really just understanding what it means to be in radical self-care. What does it mean to nourish yourself in the season after the kind of newborn phase, through motherhood, and everywhere in between? How to create a business that is nourished and nurturing. This podcast is really a smorgasbord. We cover a lot of topics in a short amount of time. It's an honest conversation, intimate conversation of the journey of being a woman before children, with children and a business. I hope that you enjoy. Well, hello, Kate. How are you?
I'm really good this morning, actually. I just did the school drop, distributing children into various places, and I'm back home with my cup of coffee and feeling good.
I love that you said distributing children. It's like one out, the next one out, and then you get in the car and you're like, yes.
It's a bit like that. It was a crazy morning. My almost 3-year-old really did not want to put on his shoes, and then the shoes went on, and then he wanted to take them off, and it was like it's just kind of really intense. So done with that portion of the morning and ready to get stuck into a good chat.
Yeah, Ainsley this morning, she turned 4, and so for her, she got some money. So I said, well, this is how much money you have, and you can go buy something. So trying to teach her about, value of money gently. And so she bought a baby doll and a pram. So she took the baby doll in a nappy in the pram to daycare today. And I'm like, happy Thursday, everybody. Everest is here. And
that's awesome.
Yeah. So with that, tell us a bit about yourself, Kate.
So I was about to say I'm a yoga and meditation teacher, and that's really one part of who I am. I guess my work in the world is really significant to me, and it's close to my heart. Yoga and meditation has helped me immensely in my personal life, and I feel like teaching has come really naturally. I've always been teaching for as long as I can remember. Even when I was a teenager, I was teaching drama to younger kids, and so that's kind of in my blood. I love to facilitate and hold space and do women's circles. And I guess the other part of my life is that I'm a mother, and a mother of boys. So I live with 3 males, my husband and 2 boys. And their energy at this level, at this stage of life, is really high. The house is pretty loud and pretty chaotic. So I feel like mothering and my contribution to my family is as significant, if not more significant, than the work I do in the world. They're quite different. Holding space for women and then kind of playing and wrestling and chasing my boys and playing in that sort of rough, high energy way. But yeah, they're beautiful kids, and I really love being a mother. It teaches me every day, and my boys, they are in a way my highest level teachers, because they're constantly showing me where my triggers are and where my patterns are. And, I get really impatient with them a lot of time, and they show me the ways in which I like to control certain situations. And, you can't really control young children. And so it's this huge lesson in letting go and having an intention and trying to show the way with them, to keep them safe and on a good path in life. But there's also a good degree of letting go in there as well.
Totally. I actually feel the same way. I feel like Ainsley, she was a very, 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 very unplanned pregnancy. And when we had her name picked out before we had her, before we even fell pregnant, her name is Clearing in the Woods. That's the definition of Ainsley. And I feel like, just perhaps you too, once you've had children, you feel very called and convicted in what you do as a career. But mothering is like the complete antithesis often to like our ego and our growing our businesses. It's this moment of being in complete moments. And I truly do believe also that children are able to really, if you allow them to, they clear out so much baggage that we carry around. With that being said, what are some of, when you're looking back, because we're really focusing today on kind of like living your life in your own way. And we were talking earlier before we started the podcast kind of about some shifts that you've made in your business and the things that you've aligned with that are really important to you and where you're going. So when you look back on your life, what are some of the pivotal, like 1 or 2 pivotal moments where you decided to take control of your life and do it in your own way?
Okay, there are 2 that are coming to mind. So I'll go kind of chronologically and go back. When my first child was born in 2012, I sort of expected that I would take like a year off and really focus on motherhood. I was really excited to become a mother. My birth plan did not work out as planned. After 24 hours of incredibly difficult labor, he was basically stuck posterior, not moving. I wasn't dilating, and he got really distressed and ended up having an emergency cesarean. And that was just the beginning of the chaos, really. He was a really unsettled baby, and I became a very anxious mother. He basically just cried all the time, and everyone's like, oh, he's got reflux, or he's colicky, or he's this or that. And, he just screamed, and he was losing weight. He wasn't breastfeeding effectively. And so I was on this intense journey with trying to increase my milk supply and pumping and making homemade formula. And this went on for months and months. And I was really drowning. My mental health got to kind of breaking point where I'd started to have these fantasies of self-harming and harming my baby. And I was at this point where something needed to change. I just could not sit inside for 13 hours a day and waiting till my husband got home to pass the baby over, because I couldn't go out. He was just screaming all the time, and it was kind of torture. And, I lost faith in my ability to be a mother. I'm like, why is this baby crying? Like, isn't he supposed to be at peace in my arms? And so I needed to make a choice to do something different. And that for me was actually going back to a yoga practice. And, part of me felt a bit guilty. I enrolled in my teacher training basically because I wanted to do a deep dive and really immerse myself in studying yoga, because yoga nidra had become really helpful for me. I was experiencing quite high levels of anxiety, and with that insomnia, and I'd become unable to sleep. This was when he was probably about 5 months old. So yoga nidra was my life raft, and it really started to help me reprogram my brain so that I could fall to sleep again. And then I was like, okay, I want to study this. And so I enrolled in teacher training. And at the time, it felt like it made so much sense for me to get a break and do what I needed. But there was also a lot of guilt wrapped up in that. Like, what am I doing leaving my exclusively breastfed, albeit difficultly breastfed, and not completely, totally, breastfed, because I was using formula and other things as well. We had supply issues, but I was leaving him for a day a week to go to this yoga teacher training, and it felt possibly a little bit indulgent, but at the same time, it was really what I needed. I needed that break, and my family was very supportive. My husband and my mother-in-law would drive him over to me on lunch break, and so I could breastfeed him, and then I was pumping at morning and afternoon break. So, it kind of came at a cost, but it enabled me to just have something that was, I guess, mine. And I know that sounds maybe a bit egotistical, but it was really about me doing something that I loved, so I could remember who I was and reconnect with myself, and not be responsible just for 1 day a week for every need of my babies, that I had someone else looking after him.
That could be a whole podcast, like in and of itself, the journey, like their first year. Like I also had a long labor, but I ended up having her naturally with an epidural. But once we had her, I was like, oh, I'll just breastfeed. Like, I was hell bent on breastfeeding, but I had insufficient glandular tissue, which is like 1 in 1,000 women. And no matter how much oats, no matter how much domperidone I could pump into my body, there was no way in hell I was going to make enough milk at all. And so we ended up using donor milk. I remember the first outing that we had, I think it was like 2 weeks, the midwife came and she breastfed for 40 minutes and she only got 30 mils off of both sides. And the midwife was like, you got to go get formula. And I remember in the car driving with Andrew to the pharmacy just sobbing, because I'm like, this is not what I wanted to do. And now if we ever have another one, I would just be like, it is like there's so much I would change about the way the mindset that I had around what was good and what was bad in motherhood. It really wrecked me. Like it wrecked me for the first 9 months, I think. It's all a blur. Like it's all just like whoosh, a blur. But I love what you said about kind of going on to what you said of when we're moms or new moms, this idea that self-care is somehow selfish, right? Mm-hmm. Like, working through like, wow, I want to spend some time aligning myself as a mom, but I get nervous or I feel guilty or that it's not the right thing to do for me is interesting. So how did you work through that?
I guess it was a pretty long and painful journey, really. And I think sometimes it's the only way. You know, I saw for myself that, you know, even from a young child, my self-worth had been tied up in achievement. I was a pretty academic child and thrived off the praise that I got when I was successful. And you know, the whole world kind of encourages us to, you know, if you work hard, you'll be successful. If you just work hard enough, you'll get a good result. And, you know, when it came to mothering, I was working really hard and I was doing everything. You know, I took the domperidone as well, and I was at some point people thought I had insufficient glandular tissue, but it ended up, because there are 3 reasons why supply is low. Either it's you just cannot produce enough, your prolactin's not high enough, so in which case you can take a pharmaceutical product to help boost your prolactin to boost your production, or you don't have enough tissue so to store the milk, or the baby's not removing it. And so by process of elimination, we found that his jaw was misaligned from the birth. And so his jaw was wonky, so he didn't have a good latch. It looked like he was sucking just fine. And I was incredibly lucky a friend had referred me to this lactation consultant when my baby was like 11 weeks old, and she was looking for a mother with a young baby to come up on stage when she was presenting at this conference with midwives and pediatricians and doulas and the whole lot. And so I was like, yep, pick me. And so me and my 11-week-old baby went into the city, and he just looked at me and she said, his latch is not working. He needs to go and see a chiropractor and get a little palate massage and get a few adjustments because he's not removing enough milk. That's why your supply is low. So hallelujah, I found a solution, but then I needed to not only, you know, his latch had to be fixed, but I needed to increase my production. So I worked really, really hard on that, tirelessly, you know, in fact, and it took a couple of months to get back up to full supply. So by the time he was 6 months old, I had a full supply of milk and he'd moved on to solids and, you know, still breastfeeding. But
I actually love that you're talking about that, because so many people, like so many doctors and even lactation consultants that haven't been properly trained in latch don't understand a tongue and lip tie. And so many babies now have tongue and lip ties, and it's very simply fixed. Yeah. And it can make a huge difference. But until we start talking about insufficient glandular tissue and or jaw misalignment, chiro, osteopathy, like the second day Ainsley was born, we were in the osteopath.
Yeah.
Because I was like, I need it, she needs it. And, you know, all that type of stuff that's kind of like woo woo, you know, it's actually really important. And especially if you want to have a breastfeeding relationship, I think I'm totally like, yes, you should go see someone who actually knows what they're doing. And lactation consultants, oh my gosh. I would say to people, if you're going to get something for a new mom, bring them food that they can put in their freezer or buy a lactation consultant.
Right.
And practical here.
And because there were lactation consultants in the hospital, you know, wandering around. No. And this woman, you know, she's got 35 years of experience or something. She just kind of looked at me and looked at the baby and was like, it's so obvious to her. Yeah. It was so obvious. And you know, she just had the gift of being able to see. And that's the value of a well-trained lactation consultant. So
I didn't think we'd be talking about lactation consultants today, but you know what? Like,
no.
Like, this is actually really important though. Like, this is really important stuff that no one like talks about on a big
yeah.
It's really important. Okay, so you had the first babe, you were doing this, you were doing yoga nidra. It was a huge transition for you. You got full supply at 6 months and then you decided to eat food, which is just the irony behind all of it. Yeah. And then what do you feel like your second pivotal moment was?
So that second moment was probably, it was last winter actually. I had just finished a really successful online program called Radical Self-Care Project, which I developed when my second baby was about 6 months old, and, set about building the course and learning how to, set it up and create the content. Had 50 participants, was really successful. And then I came to the end of that program, and all of my friends who are in business and business mentors that I have, everyone was saying to me, do what you can to launch it really quickly again, within 6 weeks if you can, because you want to capitalize on the marketing and promotions you've done from the first course and just go ahead and relaunch straight away again. If you wait longer than 6 weeks, the recognition of the name will start to dwindle. And so I sat with that for a little bit and was starting to prepare to relaunch, and being a bit of a perfectionist, I'm constantly innovating, and I couldn't just relaunch it as is. I wanted to create all this new content and increase the value. And then it just occurred to me, I've been having this feeling for a little while. Like, the core of the program, Radical Self-Care Project, is about, it's not a one-size-fits-all, tick your box to radical self-care. It's about supporting people to tune in to their intuition, their inner wisdom, so that they can respond to their needs in a way that's most authentic for them. So it's essentially a coaching program that combines journaling, which is a beautiful way of having a conversation with yourself and unpacking what it is you need, what it is you long for, and meditation. So mindfulness, creating some space for yourself to really listen to that inner voice. And I feel like the method of the program delivery, which was, emails and online tutorials and all this kind of digital technology focused stuff, was a little bit at odds for me with the core teachings. I feel like technology and social media, and it can really fracture our attention. And so if I'm asking people to go get their mindfulness lesson and they have to go into the tyranny of the inbox and be bombarded with all, these other emails, it's like, there's got to be a better way. And so I actually didn't relaunch. Instead, I took all the content and put it into a journal. And that's the way that I love to have a conversation with myself, is to get pen and paper and to write and have a book that I can take with me and go and sit under a tree or at the beach or something. And so, yeah, it didn't make sense business-wise to then create a much lower value product and to not relaunch something that I'd spent a year sort of building the brand and creating. But I guess it was important for me to follow my intuition and to do something that felt more aligned. And that's not to say that I'll never do online programs again, because I think, I have connections with people all over the world, and running a group mentoring call on Zoom or something, it's powerful, and the oxytocin and connection still flies around in the same way it would with us all in a room together. And so I guess I'm just more mindfully thinking about how I might go to create another online offering in the future that's not so inbox dependent or social media dependent.
There's two things I love about this. One is that you followed your intuition, like, go you, because it's so easy for ego to get really sneaky. Like, oh, you can sell more, you can make it more, you could, I just ran a 4-week program for like $20 a person, and there are, there's a lot of other, I could have sold it for $500, but the point of the exercise is that there's a difference between like sharing your passion and then just trying to make a ton of money. Like, and I think what I'm seeing a lot in the entrepreneurship world is a lot of zhuzh for a lot of money and a lot of trying to like solve people's problems, when really exactly what you just said was what you need is the space to fall into your own intuition. The second thing that I thought was really interesting about what you said was repackage it, make it better, make it bigger, make it more, make more money. That was awesome. You should redo that again because it made you feel so alive. It was do it again because you don't want to waste all of this energy that you put into branding. And then you should add a pony to it and sell it. Like that's the kind of like hustle mentality that just like makes my brain crazy. And it's very, 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 very easy to fall into.
Yeah, because we see so many other successful women entrepreneurs doing that. And I guess with the success of B School, not that I'm a B School graduate, but, Marie Forleo's everywhere. encouraging women, particularly new mums, to start home-based businesses, because at the end of the day, you're going to apparently get a 6 or 7 figure income, and the methodology that is shared through this online marketing, and it's not just B School, is that you reiterate, you put the price up, you charge what you're worth, you know, in kind of inverted commas. And gosh, it is hard to put a value on what it is that we offer. And there are a lot of overinflated offerings out there. And I just don't want to be a part of that hustle. And it's hard because the decision that I made probably meant, I'm sure it meant that I earned less money. I did end up crowdfunding the book. So I sold my first batch of 250 books and raised $11,000 to print the book, which was amazing. And, you know, in terms of doing things your own way, I think that's possibly not the way that people typically do things. They build the thing first and then they open cut and see who wants one. What crowdfunding enabled me to do was to put the idea out there, say, hey, I've got this beautiful book, I've written it, and the design has started, and here's some pictures of what it will look like. But I need to find out how many of you all want one before I go to print. And when people started putting up their hands to pre-order, then I could collect that income and then go and print it.
I love that. I think
sustainable.
You know, there's a difference between, like, I think, you know, I was actually literally talking to my friend about this the other day. I said, you know, at some point, I think women do undersell themselves when it comes to how much they charge, like for a speaking engagement or for mentoring if it's one-on-one. But there's also, it's a balance. It's not just about, well, I'm worth $5,000 for an hour of speaking, for example, which is some people charge that $5,000, $10,000, you know, for speaking engagement for an hour or 2 hours of speaking. It's a balance between seeing your worth as a woman and knowing that you do have value, inherent monetary, you know, that's how the world works. We have to play the game. But it's also about making sure that when you build a business that you're authentically showing up in a way that your message can get across to as many people as you want to. Right. So like if you're going to have an exclusive, you know, VIP training and you're like, you know what, it's actually going to cost me, that will cost me $5,000 to $3,000 because of all the prep plus flights and accommodation. And you know that audience can afford it and they're looking for that, then you play. But like you just said, you're going to create a book now that, let's just say 10,000 women get, and you may not make a ton of money off of it, but your message that you feel very passionate about is getting across to more people.
Mm-hmm.
Does that make sense?
Yep. Yeah, it does. I'm just thinking that you said 10,000 people have got my book, and that would be amazing.
Maybe it does happen, you know, maybe 10,000 people get it, because it's not $500 to get the book. It's $35 or whatever you price at. So it's a digestible amount so that many people can have access to it. And then you have different tiers of entry points in your business.
That's part of, I guess, what I was creating as well, because I just had this e-course that was, you know, $200 to do the online program with me. And then I heaps of free content, as you do when you're in online business. Yeah. And in a way, it did make sense to go back and create that entry-level product where people could buy the book. You know, it's $49. They can get the book and they can work through it over a 14-week period. It's sort of a guided journaling practice. And then that next level offering is some kind, I'm doing a little bit of mentoring at the moment, very sort of informally, but for income. And maybe there's a level where I will then start to formalize that a little bit more. But it's all just trial and error, really. I feel like following a set formula just makes you into a cookie cutter where everyone's drinking the same Kool-Aid and everyone's social media accounts look the same. And when you're in conscious business, it's important to keep checking back in with, well, how is this really aligned with me? And how can I best be of service to my community without selling out? And it's not necessarily about how many people I reach on social media, but making sure the connections I do have are really conscious and connected, and I'm, you know, providing value. You know,
I love that. I love the idea of conscious business. So what does in her own way mean? Like when you're looking back, like all that you're doing, what does it mean to be, I think you just kind of hit on it. It's like conscious business, speaking to the people that you want to speak to, even if you don't have 150,000 followers on Instagram.
Right. Yeah, I think it really just comes back to tuning in to myself and being really grounded in me. You know, and it goes the same for mothering, you know, mothering in my own way, not feeling like I have to rely on books or resources or parenting blogs. My 2-year-old's having a huge regression with his toilet training at the moment. It's not really training, but his massive regression. And I I started to freak out and Google stuff and ask my husband and ask my friends, and I was in a bit of panic mode. And I feel like I sort of moved outside of myself.
Yes.
And I had this little like voice that told me, just get grounded, pay attention to yourself, get connected with you, get connected with him. And so I just started some conversations with him around, well, would you like to wear undies or a nappy today? Or why is it that you don't want to use the toilet today? And just trying to talk to him like a person instead of feeling like I had to go and find a manual to tell me how to control or train my child. And so I think it really is so much about trusting ourselves. And one of my teachers, Katie Minitzis, I was talking to her a couple of days ago, actually from my Radical Self-Care podcast, and she was talking about the idea of true self-confidence in the way that the Yoga Sutras and Patanjali and Yogi Bhajan talk about true self-confidence. And it, instead of having to go outside of ourselves to find all the wisdom and the ideas, there's this kind of need to come back to our own common sense and trust that the work that we've done, the knowledge that we have, is percolating away inside of us. And if we just get quiet and use our common sense, the answers are there.
Totally. I completely agree. Our daughter did the same at potty training, and also she's completely sleep regressed. So she was totally happy to be in her room. And then there was this giant huntsman spider. It was horrible. It was right by her bed, and she freaked out, and it really traumatized her. And her mind is just wild at the moment with imagination and play. And we've now moved her mattress into our room. And, I know there's a lot of people who are like, oh, she should be, sleeping in her room, and you should put her back into her room, and, it's going to impact your sex life. It's going to impact your marriage. I'm like, what impacts my marriage is trying to put a 4-year-old into bed for an hour every night. And so every night I give her the option of like, do you want to sleep in your bed in mommy and daddy's room, or do you want to sleep in your bed in this room? And we obviously have boundaries. She's not like a total free range child, but at the end of the day, I think to myself, this is a season and it's not forever. And if I put her in a situation where she actually feels unsafe because it's more convenient for my life, like, what the heck? We do that so much, even ourselves as women. We put ourselves into situations where we know we're not safe emotionally or physically because we feel like we have to, when really what our mind is saying is that's not right now. That isn't right. That decision isn't right. That relationship isn't right. Whatever it is, we dumb down our intuition to show up in a way that we think is acceptable.
Yeah, I love that you said that. I feel like there's such a rich teaching in that, because the world wants to tell us the ways in which we should be doing things, or people want to be helpful and give advice, but it's a lot of the time it's a total projection of what's going on for them, and we're all different. I mean, you ask for advice if you want advice, but if you're not asking, maybe you're just sharing and you just want to be heard, and you don't always need to. I check myself with that as well when I'm listening to my friends share about challenges that they're having. Like I really try and pay attention to, are they asking for advice here? Because if not, I need to just shut up and, not share, like, because we all have that desire to help and resolve people's problems for them. And
totally. I completely agree. Or like people ask, like, what should I do in my business? And I literally wrote back, well, what do you think you should do in your business? Don't seek affirmation. I think oftentimes as moms and as women, we're constantly seeking affirmation outside of ourselves to tell us that we are aligned. And I love what you said earlier of like, I had to go back in, I had to go back still, I had to go back into trust. If that's yoga, nidra, if that's meditation, if that's prayer, whatever that looks like for you, it's just so noisy. Our lives are so noisy and we're not being in our lives.
Yes. And I think you said something that really resonated with me. You mentioned cycles, like, it's just a phase, it's just a season. And this reminds me as well, another way that I tend to structure my days and my life is around my menstrual cycle and what I'm capable of when I'm in the summer of my cycle. So the ovulation phase, I have a lot more energy. I'm in a better place to do podcast interviews or to speak or facilitate. And I don't have as much bandwidth to do that when I'm menstruating. So I've got to be careful not to expect myself to act like a high summer ovulating woman when I'm in my bleeding days, and that's okay. And there are other tasks that I'm more attuned to when I'm in my bleeding days, reflection, kind of dreaming, using my intuition. My intuition really opens up, and meditations and I do shamanic journeys as well are very rich, and I can gather insight when I'm in menstruation in a way that I can't as easily when I'm in ovulation of my cycle. And, you know, whether women have a cycle or not, because I know some people are pregnant and breastfeeding, just tuning into our levels of energy on any given day and kind of knowing our capacity and what sort of tasks would be best suited to our level of energy or our mood on any given day is really, it makes a lot of sense to live in a way that's tuned in.
Totally. It's like, well,
it's easy to forget as well.
It is, but I think that there's this like inherent rush to like get to the finish line all the time. And it's like, there's no rush here. It's not a game. It's not a race. It's your life, and you have to create as sustainably as possible. So as you've kind of worked through the last couple, maybe 5 or 6 years with motherhood and entrepreneurship and kind of flowing more into your space, what do you think is like maybe 1 or 2 like huge take home lessons that maybe we've talked about that have been really important for you or that we haven't talked about?
I guess one thing that's top of mind is my use of music in my daily life to support my mood. And I'm really getting into a lot of kind of devotional music at the moment. And I go through phases with it, you know, I'm cyclical, but in the moment I'm loving listening to Niranjan Kaur and some of the, Sanatam Kaur and some of the Kundalini yoga practitioners who do kirtan and mantra, and it just lifts my spirits. And it will be different for everyone, I guess, but that's just really speaking to me at the moment. I was in a really shitty mood yesterday after I dropped my kids off. It had been my nearly 3-year-old had a tantrum. That's a bit of a theme at the moment with him, but I was so ragged, like my nervous system felt fried, and it was not even 9 a.m. and I could sort of feel that like anxiety rising. You know, I'm sort of prone to anxiety and stress. And if I can sort of notice that niggling feeling just creeping up, and I catch it, and I just put my headphones in and I just listen to mantra for like 30 minutes. And then I was flying. I was in such a good place. And yeah, so I guess that's one little self-care piece that's active for me at the moment. And also just going to bed early, you know, like I put the kids to bed. Most nights at the moment, I tuck up in bed, sometimes with a podcast, sometimes with my journal. Last night I took my work journal to bed, which I think is fine for me. Like, you know, it depends what kind of work I do in bed. But I was creating my content calendar for the second half of the year. And that was really pleasurable work, and it felt kind of dreamy and fun. And yeah, so I just did that in bed and then turned the lights off at 9:45 and got a good sleep.
I really like that. They were talking about, I was looking at some article recently about the use of phones before you go to sleep. Like, and I've been really guilty of that, like looking at my phone, and that becomes like my comforter. It's just so bad. What they say is the last thing that you read or that you do is filter through your subconscious. So I've been really mindful of like, okay, so if I'm going to bring my phone into bed, then I downloaded Headspace. And I just put the sleep meditation on. I'm like, if I'm gonna have my phone, at least the last things I hear or see, I want my subconscious to be listening to. Or like, you know, if you're dreaming of content, that's great because your mind then can kind of process it while you're sleeping. But be really careful about what we're watching, what we're giving our minds right before we go to sleep, because it's kind of the springboard for how it dreams.
Yeah, I love that reminder actually, because I mean, I sometimes fiddle on my phone at night. It is a comfort, isn't it? Sort of just fiddling around, just looking at stuff, and it's kind of like little snacks, you know, like little, like, I don't know, it's not like a deep nourishing meal in the way that a podcast or, you know, some journaling or meditation is. It's sort of this weird kind of like junk food snacky kind of tendency. I don't know if that metaphor makes sense, but I've been thinking as well, like coming into winter, as I was making my content schedule last night, I've got some audio and video content that I'm going to be producing over the winter. But for me, winter is a time of hibernation, and I was even thinking about possibly having a social media break completely for a month, the month of July. And as someone who runs, you know, a lot of online content, that's kind of a radical, and it kind of scares me a little bit. But I think just to get out of the habit of consuming stuff that's not necessarily what I want to be consuming, because you don't know what you're going to get with social media, which is the why we keep scrolling, because we're like, oh, I'm looking for that next thing. And then we end up seeing something that maybe gives us a trigger or a negative thought, whether it's, oh, I'm not as good as that, or oh, I'm missing out on that, or I don't know. It's kind of toxic. And I'm just wondering what sort of space I could create for myself by just eliminating social media completely for a month.
Well, I think it's great. I went away to Eastern Oregon. My cousin lives there, and literally they have like 8 gigs a month. So there was no way I could even be online because they don't have enough gigs for all of us to have our phones on. And they literally, it's just dial up because they're 35 minutes outside of a 100 person town, and they're an hour away from town. So it's like 30 miles down a gravel road. Like, I think they go through a set of tires a month because the gravel is it's just crazy.
Wow.
Every day, up and back, like 60 miles every day to drop their kids off to school. But the nice thing about it was I thought, wow, I can actually live. I actually wake up, I do devotional prayer in the morning. I go to bed at 9 o'clock at night because I'm so freaking tired because I've been working all day. I've been sitting on my butt looking at social media. I've been thinking about my business. I'm like actually legitimately living. And it was so good. It takes an hour it took an hour for my mobile phone to get in reception. So I wouldn't get any reception until we drove into the bigger town. So the only way I could even check my phone was if we were going into town, and then it would be off once we left. And so I think what you just said is really interesting it's so radical. I'm like, and not having to go, I'm like, I was thinking to myself, is that radical? Is it radical to like live in your life for a month? That's the irony behind it, right? Like, oh my God, my business is going to fall apart. And it's like, well, it probably won't, because you'll have so much. I'm just thinking this to myself because I've been thinking the same thing of like, is it radical? Like, is it radical to not be like boobing, literally like nursing? Like, I feel like I'm breastfeeding sometimes off of social media. Do you know what
I know what you mean.
You know how they said TV was a boob tube? Like growing up, they're like, oh, you're watching the boob tube. I don't know. That's what I always call it. And now I feel like phones and social media is like a boob tube. Like it's this like pacifier of like, being doped up on. I have such a love-hate relationship with social media because I do feel like it gives your message across to people who would never meet you. But I also feel like it's so draining, and it takes away from our ability to stay grounded.
Yeah, and we are not alone in sharing this perspective. I'm sure many of the listeners and people who are even connected to us on social media feel the same way. I guess it's not that it's so radical, but it's countercultural to be off social media.
Countercultural,
it's mainstream is that people are on social media every single day. They're checking it multiple times a day. And so it is a countercultural choice to not be on social media. Like I'm not on Facebook. Well, I am, but I don't log in. And my brothers and sisters are always messaging me on Facebook and then getting cranky with me because I miss stuff. And it's like, if you want to reach me, send me an email, particularly if you're planning an event, or a text, or just call me. Don't message me through Facebook Messenger. I don't even have it on my phone. And so the one thing that I'm holding on to is Instagram, and because it's visual and I'm a visual person, I do just love it, but it's like candy or the boob tube, so I think it'll be good for me to just step away and see what happens.
I know. And there's so much fear around like slowing your business down, but like in Australia, I think that's kind of maybe more of a not American thing, but in Australia, between like the beginning of Christmas till like the end of January, there are businesses who literally shut their doors for 4 weeks because there just isn't enough people to come through the door. It's not even worth having open. And I feel like we need to give ourselves radical winters. I really run on this idea of seasons. You have it more like a cyclical in your month. I like to but I like to work on maybe in bigger chunks, like really allowing families and women like a true radical winter. Like bears go into the freaking cave and they do not come out. They just sleep. They're not like running around in the middle of like a snow-covered forest, like trying to kill a whole bunch of things, because they will die. And the same thing for us as entrepreneurs. If we don't give ourselves radical winters to actually hibernate and be, we just can't. We just literally just burn out. So I think it's a really, really good point. So is there any additional advice that you'd like to give someone who's like, okay, so how do I start I'm like that fried mama who's toasted. I'm the entrepreneur who's fried. We talked about yoga, we talked about meditation, talked about journaling, grounding, music. What was the mindset that you kind of, when you were just like, all right, we're going the different path? What, in that detox process, what was the thing that you held on to?
I think it was a vision for the fact that things could be different. When stuff was so hard and I was so burned out, there was this longing for another way. And as I started to imagine what my life could look like instead of what my life was like, kind of just surviving day to day, it was this desire to really create a change, and that change actually needed to start with me. I mean, when it comes to self-care, there's a whole lot of components, you know, and asking for support and help and, you know, having a community around you to look after you and to be your friend and to take up some slack when you're unable to do whatever it is that you think you should be doing is really important. But also for me, it was about that self-empowered choice of I'm going to make a decision here to do things differently.
I love that. And I think also one of the things I'll give myself to, which I know you would say yes to, is being mindfully compassionate the whole time. So you have to go back to the old patterns. If you swing back on a roundabout and you go, God, I've been here before. It's like the way that I undid that, you know, it's like when you have a piece of jewelry and it's knotted up, and the more you try to pull on it, the tighter the knot gets.
Yes.
Gently kind of loosen it. You push it back into itself and gently go about it. You unwind it a lot faster. And I feel like that's compassion.
Yeah. And patience as well. I think we're so used to, and you said it before, you know, rushing through our lives, and have the patience to go at a slower pace. And to be just patient with ourselves. You know, if we're struggling or if we've been through trauma or grief or whatever it is related to birth or mothering or not, you know, it takes time to heal. And sometimes we think that we've got our stuff sorted out. And like you said, you kind of loop back and kind of go through it again. And healing and personal growth is not linear. And when it comes to self-compassion, you just reminded me, Tara Brach is this beautiful Buddhist teacher who provides talks through her podcast, and she's been a real rock for me. She doesn't know me, but I listened to her podcast, and it's just so soothing to the soul. So I would encourage people, if you don't already have, you know, a faith or a teacher or something that kind of connects you spiritually to something higher, something bigger than you, that gives you a sense of purpose. If you don't already have something like that, sort of feeling into what might help give you that sense of being part of something bigger and plugging into it wherever you can, whether it's through talks or devotional music or reading spiritual texts or something that can just remind you that our day-to-day struggles in the scheme of things they keep us small, you know, they keep us in our ego. And so then the troubles feel like they're so vast. Yeah. And when we can plug into something higher, whether it's, you know, faith, spirituality or whatever it is, we can kind of move beyond and build that resource for ourselves to want to keep going and to believe that we are worth more than kind of our small struggles.
I agree. It's the only thing that saved me, I think, is my faith. 100%. There's no way in hell I would have gone through my eating disorder recovery, been able to completely switch gears in my business recently, just saying no more coaching. I just need to just go inward and trust myself. There's no way I could have done that without my faith. It would have been impossible. Yeah. And I think that we think that that's like poo-poo. Oh, we'll get to that at some point when I'm free, when I'm financially free, I'll have time to do that. It's like, no, now.
It's everything. And it's actually everything. For, you know, and just hearing you talk now as well, it just like, really, this is my rock. Like my spiritual practice.
Yeah, it is your rock.
Is my rock. It keeps me from feeling small and stuck.
It is. It totally is. And I think that we so often don't talk about it enough in a very pragmatic daily practice. We kind of talk about it in like an abundance mindset and all this kind of woo-woo. I feel like it's the ego masking itself, you know, it's like the wolf in sheep's clothes, you know, it's like, this is about you having a relationship with your creator, whatever that is, your spirituality, so that you then can go out and through in the world, as opposed to going out and through in the world and being so far out that you can't come back in without it being so devastating.
I'm thinking as well about a lot of spiritual kind of props and things that are on sale now, whether it's like, go and get your mala beads or oracle cards or whatever it is, buy all this stuff in order to be spiritual and have a spiritual practice. Whereas at the end of the day, it's about your relationship to the divine, however that is expressed in your life. Absolutely. And you don't need any props at all.
No.
And so if you can, because they're just another thing to get attached to and to lean on. Yeah. And it's not about the tool. It's about your relationship to the divine.
Absolutely.
The tools might help you get there initially, but then at the end of the day, you don't really need them.
No, I totally agree with you. So, Kate, wonderful podcast interview. Such good flow and conversations. I was like, I don't even know how to entitle this podcast because it's so like all. It's like the buffet of conversations. I feel like it was a good buffet. Like a really good
buffet. Yeah, really nourishing. Yeah.
Maybe I'll just call that the Nourish Buffet of Conscious Living. That would be a podcast title. So tell us where we can find you.
So I've got a couple of places at the moment. So I teach yoga in Waverton in Sydney, and you can find me at katealexandra.com.au. And for anything related to Radical Self-Care Project, just go to radicalselfcareproject.com and you can find the Radical Self Journal there. And given that I'm about to dive into a winter's hibernation, if you want to stay in touch with me, join my email list because that's where I'll be communicating with people. But you can find me on social if you want and follow me so that when I come out of hibernation full of energy, we can connect there too. And that's, I'm sure you'll provide the links, Michelle.
I'll get them off you and put them up for you. But a pleasure to meet you.
It has been a pleasure. Thank you so much.
I'm really excited. And I might have you back on and talk to you about radical self-care and just, we could do a whole podcast on that. That would be pretty fun.
Cool. Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you for joining me today. If you'd like more information about myself, my journey, my public speaking engagements, or life coaching with me, please head to my website, mishpope.com. If you can kindly leave me a beautiful review on iTunes, I would be forever grateful. I can't wait to connect again in the next episode.